totally, this is what I wanted to show.
Oh, this is all I love.
This is the best.
I read this aloud to myself. This is the
best sequence of events. Friday's press gaggle, barely exaggerated. At 12:03 p.m., President Trump told reporters he wanted a ceasefire with Iran. At 12:05, he declared victory. At 12:07, he announced he was sending Marines. At 12:08, he said no boots on the ground.
How do you do that in 60 seconds?
At 12:11, he said he did not want a ceasefire. At 12:16, he declared victory again. At 12:17, he asked for a ceasefire. At 12:23, he told NATO they were cowards. At 12:29, he said Iran was begging for a ceasefire. At 12:31, he said everything was perfect. At 12:36, he said $500 oil was a good thing. At 12:37, he demanded Iran open the Hormuz. At 12:39, he said Hormuz was never closed. At 12:41, he said the U.S. was not at war with Iran. At 12:42, he declared victory in Iran. There's no... What are we doing? There's no way.
We're did you hear the next thing though? We've had some developments since this. Where now it appears that we may jointly operate Hormuz.
Yeah.
Did you see the Dylan Savage?
Well, sorry, you're wrong. Pentagon weighs deployment of air troops to Iran.
God.
It's like if
we were so close.
If you blink, you will literally see a role reversal. And my favorite thing, because as you might know, dirty commie and all, I have this principled stance that money is more fake. This is the fakest money has ever been. Okay, there's no world where the stock market is associated with any fucking fundamentals whatsoever. We have never had money be so fake in our entire lives. Because while this guy is contradicting himself, sometimes in the same minute, sometimes in the same sentence, the stock market is leaning into whatever they want to hear, and they're going, "Oh no, it's great actually." Now all of a sudden, the markets are stabilizing.
Well, I do think it was really funny though that the market went back to taking a bit of a shit, and oil went back to increasing as soon as Iran said, "Hold up, hold a minute, we're not talking."
Yeah, look at this.
It's so good.
At 7:04 a.m. Eastern today, President Trump said the U.S. and Iran have had a productive discussion to end the Iran war. Okay, boom. At 7:10 a.m., S&P surged 240 points, adding $2 trillion to the market cap. 27 minutes later, Iran completely denied all of President Trump's claims and said there has been no contact with the U.S. At 8 a.m. Eastern, the S&P 500 had fallen 120 points, erasing $1 trillion in market cap. There is a $3 trillion swing market cap at 56 minutes just in the S&P 500.
Yeah, I love that. The S&P 500, famous for its volatility.
Yeah.
That's it's hard to convey just how, what you never see, you don't hear anybody say anymore?
What?
Nothing ever happens.
Yeah, that's true.
I think we gotta
eviscerated.
We are in something.
Bro,
and we're not out of it, and it's not ending anytime soon.
When Francis Fukuyama is running around being like, countries need to develop nuclear sovereignty pronto, it's fucking over, baby.
I do think that there is but this goes to something that you were getting at though about why it's these third way people, nobody listen. You got the fucking Jerry Baker at the Wall Street Journal saying we can't trust our president or whatever. It's just hard to convey how strange and surreal it is to have something this yes, this is what I was talking about. Which, by the way, look up somebody find the Iranian embassy in I think South Africa. They copied the tweet.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Trump tells reporters that the Strait of Hormuz may be jointly controlled by me and the Ayatollah. Oh, that's brilliant. That's fucking brilliant, dude. Oh, my Lord. That's so good. Energy industry insider in Iran tells me the following, and it's stunning, says Shrita Parsi. Before the war, Iran produced just shy of 1.1 million barrels of oil per day and sold it at $65 per barrel minus $18 discount, i.e. $47. Today, it produces 1.5 million barrels per day and sells it at $110 with only $2 to $4 a discount. And this does not include petrochemical sales that not only have increased, but are now being sold as a larger set of customers compared to before the war. Moreover, Iran is receiving payments through new mechanisms that bypass the UAE, which were set up after the June war. In essence, and this is really important to understand, Trump and Israel's war has ended up delivering Iran de facto sanctions relief. And on top of that, they're now paying. They're making them pay tolls if they want to pass the fucking Strait of Hormuz.
Well, and they're the way that they're making those tolls work. So, like in the 1970s, one of the ways that America dealt with the oil shock in 74, in 73, 74, and then in 79, but especially in the earlier phase, was that America. We left a gold standard earlier in the decade, but the biggest one of the biggest, most unheralded parts of that was that we recycled petrodollars by selling all of these governments, crazy huge weapons. That was part of how we fixed all this. We used that geopolitical tumult and that circumstance to reweight the dollar and recreate, and help, restore a stronger dollar by having, these Arab governments spend and Iran at that time spend crazy amounts of money with us on F6 on fighter jets and whatever. Now, like Iran arguably is, trying to force a similar kind of thing, because not only have they, clearly they're in the money, as Trita Parsi tells it in some respect, but now they're also saying, no, the only way the oil goes is if you pay us in yuan.
Yes.
Meaning that they are trying to
destroy the petrodollar system.
Exactly. And, granted, the petrodollar system is it's a bit of an antiquated way of looking at it, just because it doesn't.
It's also one that I feel like they just kind of threw that out there for China.
It's the image. It's about how it looks.
Yeah, China doesn't even fucking want it. I don't think China is ready for being the domineering hegemonic.
They don't
power.
want it. They want to do nothing and win, and they will. But
this is the unironic do nothing win moment, though, because China is always doing things right. I don't agree with the do nothing win principle when it comes to China, but this is absolutely a moment where they did nothing. They literally, objectively did nothing.
And they will probably be part of the diplomatic resolution.
Yeah. Well, they have to be.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not really.
Who's going to maintain stability?
Right now, the crazy thing is that supposedly the talks that they're claiming have been happening are in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Which is also
Islamabad.
But it's okay, so it's just a rehash of the Oman thing, where you're going to a third party.
I personally take offense to as a Turk, because we are normally the table. The fact that they're going to Islamabad instead of Turkey is unbelievable. We are the table. We are at the table is really fucked up.
You're under the table right now.
Yeah, we're under the table currently. Literally, the Iranians lasered one of our helicopters, which is there's two major military presence in Qatar, and it's America, obviously the biggest one, CENTCOM, and then Turkey. I don't know what the fuck they were doing, flying around their troops, and I believe Aselsan engineers in a helicopter. I don't know what the fuck was going on there, but yeah, they shot down a Turkish helicopter. We're no longer at the table. It frustrates me. Islam good, bro. Islamabad is Islamophobic. Yeah. Turkey's an intermediary. Okay, never mind. We're still at Hakan Fidan. We're still at the table. Never mind. Confirmed. Turkish source tells Al Monitor the U.S. is asking for talks.
Okay, but this is awesome, because now all the leaks are just, hey, look at all of our ideas for talks. We love talking. We love talking.
Yeah,
we love talking. We love talking. Do not mind all these troops that we're massing.
Yeah.
Do not mind that we've killed literally every person that we've talked to.
Yeah.
Don't mind it.
Iran don't fuck with Fidan. Yeah, no shit, dude. Look.
Duh.
Yeah, this is. Sorry, but Turkey is literally a principled
second
agent.
largest standing army in NATO. Come on.
Yeah, and also literally has its own sovereign needs, obviously, has its own regional goals, of course. And America sometimes lets them accomplish it, which regional goals basically just killing Kurds. That's for the most part, that's what the regional goals are. But but outside of that, there is tensions boiling between Turkey and Israel, but it doesn't change the dynamic that Turkey does actually play. Turkey does play a major role in making sure that the Israeli energy grid stays stable. The pipelines from Azerbaijan go through Turkey, and the Turkish ports are how they deliver the oil and gas to Israel. That's 45% of Israel's entire energy grid. And there's never been a moment where Turkey has said, yeah, we're going to fucking shut this down. Okay? Turks used to deny this, by the way. Ironically enough, now they say, "Oh, what can we do? We don't have any power." But they used to literally deny it.
Well, and like it's like I mean, there's like obviously so much more about this than me, but to me it has always struck me that like Turkey's policy is just a triangulation game. Like it's like they know where their people are at on this issue. They know what the demands are of like their current set of geopolitical alliances and strategy, and then there's also like whatever set of policies are good to preserve like the level of accumulation for the people that run the show. And so it's like always finding like what is like like the 5-inch by 6-inch hole in which you can fit something that like meets all those needs.
Yeah. But I think the real test of like whether this is unsinkable aircraft carrier or Zog theory will be if Israel gets to wage war against Turkey and then like undermines the entire NATO allegiance altogether. Because like at that point it's like undeniable, right? Like it's fucking ridiculous that America would be like, yeah, you know what, this NATO stuff is too big.
I mean, NATO is. I mean, look, one of the. Okay, I'll throw this out there so that I can because this is actually like what I'm about to say is like real live stream fail material, which is just that I do think that it's like NATO is coming under an enormous amount of pressure, and simply because the fight is now happening in Iran, I think people have kind of lost sight of a bit about some of what makes NATO feel very fragile at this moment. Like the geopolitical origin of NATO, right? Like the basis of it was an alliance to combat the Soviet Union and to prevent the spread of communism there. And it came together in the years after World War II, at the beginning of the Cold War, and we were almost a century on. And does the strategic rationale that was the basis for the origin of NATO still hold? And I'm posing a question that like was very heavily theorized and discussed in the 1990s in particular. George Kennan had some interesting stuff to say about it as somebody who was one of the ideological inspirations for NATO and a Cold War ideologue who then by the 90s is like, this thing may have run its course. Well, that's a thing.
Breaking, Anadolu Agence says,
oh, this is awesome.
U.S. delegation coming to Pakistan in a day or two for possible talks, but Iran's still not ready due to mistrust. Pakistani foreign ministry sources tell Anadolu. Dude, imagine the pump fake. They go and they're not there.
I mean, the U.S. is doing that. That's what's happening. This is humiliating. So, please, Erdogan, come to Washington. We need a real government. We need a real government. We can't have these. We can't have these losers who show up to diplomacy meetings without knowing if the other people are even going, just because they know how fucked they are.
I think they should mog Witkoff and just be like, yeah, we're coming, and then just not show up. And because like, what are they gonna do? They're like talking about blowing up the energy grid in Iran. Okay, Iran has said that they're retaliating.
All right, we'll do it back.
They keep King Von posting on a daily fucking basis. They literally posted every single energy infrastructure that they will destroy in the entire fucking region. And obviously a lot of people think, oh, well, this will collapse the GCC and it will have global impacts that are insanely damaging, but maybe like the entire world will come together and like oppose Iran. But the reality of the matter is, because of the way in which global capitalism works, it creates a massive security flaw. It's a fragile ecosystem when you have a country that's willing to fucking not just like take the war back to the principal defenders, but directly to the fucking centers of profit, directly to the centers of capital. Those are American banks, right? Those are American refineries at the end of the day. Like, yeah, it's Saudi Aramco, but like who put those things together? Who still benefits from it? These are still going to be American. These are still going to be American capital owners that are not benefiting from their investments getting blown up.
And even if we don't directly own this stuff anymore, or even if we're not directly a part of it, like, I don't know, who pays for Saudi Arabia's, who supplies them with their military technology, who supplies all of these people, like essentially the rudiments of state making, let's call it, like all of the things that you need to do to be able to administer power, administer government in the 21st century. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, none of those countries could do any of it were it not for the largesse of the United States, like coming, on the other side of the table. Like that is what the U.S. brings to the bargain.
Yeah, also a massive explosion heard in Tehran along with air defenses. Like they're still being fucking bombed.
Oh yeah, great.
But I do love personally that Donald Trump went from, oh, we're gonna blow everything up to this.
Not war, not war, not war. Just peace, just peace, just peace.
No war!
Forever, forever. Peace forever. No crazy war. No crazy.
No crazy war. No guerra. He went in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. He went from yes war to no war, no crazy war, just peace, peace forever. They should immediately release Maduro, by the way, which is really fucked up. But
free my man.
yeah, free my man. High school walkout. Free Maduro walkout. 3 p.m. Netanyahu just spoke to Trump. Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
I just spoke to President Trump.
Here, read it.
I spoke earlier today with President Trump. He believes there is a chance to leverage the military achievements of the war to get all of the objectives of the war through an agreement. Such an agreement will safeguard our interests.
I think these guys don't. I think he's first.
They're
of
all trying to find a way out, man. They're all trying.
It's funny,
we're now getting
but
like
they
the
don't get it.
We're
But
getting
they
the
don't get
leaks
it.
from the Mossad saying that like the Mossad thought there was going to be an uprising. Like, oh no, this is cooked. They're done. They're trying to find the door.
They are so fucked. And the reality is, Iran. Oh my god, because they killed all the fucking restraint guys. They killed all the restraint guys, so the rest are like, no, we have the fucking upper
have you
hand.
seen Jalali's posts? The more hardliner guy from their government who's still both alive and on Twitter, who has been doing some pretty good posts today that I've been seeing.
No, they've been doing they've been doing cringe posting. The IRGC guy was like, Donald Trump, you are fired. Robert Pape is cursed to see his work vindicated over and over again.
All right, he wasn't the first guy to point out that air power never wins. To be clear,
but it's that and also the escalation ladder. He loves he only posts the same thing, copy and paste every day. He's like, well, this is the escalation trap. Please read my book.
My book. I also look as somebody who has to hawk something. I'm never gonna knock somebody for that.
Yeah.
But I think that this is part of what's so goofy though now, where it's like what we're now witnessing, like what we are seeing right now. Like set Lebanon to the side for a moment. What we're seeing in Iran is like this insane, bizarre scram. It's like the Israel and the U.S. are like, I don't. This for your audience is probably too old, but one of the best jackass. Jackass sketches is medicine ball dodgeball, and it's like fucking the US and Israel are trying to find the door in a dark room where people are throwing medicine balls like dodgeballs. It's absurd.
The IRGC clip. Oh yeah, this was the clip.
Oh, hit
Trump,
me.
you are fired. You are familiar with this sentence. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The central headquarters of Khatam al-Anbiya.
You are fired.
Donald Trump, you are fired. You are familiar with this sentence. That's hilarious.
Donald
dude.
Trump's going we need to put. We're gonna bury him under the jail. We're gonna bury him under the reactor.
I just wanted to be one of the 88 clerics. Why can't I have a say? I've studied the Quran. I know the literature. I know it. I'm Shia in my heart and soul.
I do think that there is also it's so difficult because we're now a solid decade into Trump life, and there have been so many cycles of discourses about his health, his state of mind.
Yeah.
How aware is he of what's going on? And I really do feel, not because I've seen clips of Trump where he looks out of it or out of sorts, but just I don't think have we ever seen a policy and this is for Trump I'm talking about. For Donald Trump, have we ever seen something this crazy, this, discombobulated, this contradictory?
It's funny because it's not even entirely his own fault. I mean, obviously it mostly is his fault because he still very much has the capacity to make that phone call to be like, we're done here, right? It's over. and I don't know of how much of the leverage they have. I'm certain that like reading the tea leaves here and looking at the Iranian response, if they were to like cut Israel out of the equation and were to like withdraw, which America simply doesn't do, with the exception of like with the Ansar Allah movement and stuff. But if they were to do that, if they were to give Iran assurances, like I'm certain that Iran would eventually say, all right, fine, pay us reparations, or, by unfreezing some of the assets that you have frozen for years and years. It would be a massive blow to American confidence and stuff. But like it would, in my opinion, it would probably salvage like the remains of like the American empire, at least for like another decade or two.
Had they gone in,
but if they go in gung ho, like if they continue to escalate and think that they could do boots on the ground military warfare with a country that has designed its entire defense around this exact scenario, with a topography that looks the way it does, like a fucking fortress on three sides with mountains, they're fucked. Like it's over. That's why they're quietly conceding. Well, not quietly, loudly conceding.
I mean, I do think that some of what's going on though is that like, and this is one of those things where it's like the Trump sloppiness and the incompetence really can't be dismissed or underplayed, because I do think that this is what we're like everything you said, ordinarily, if you were to get into a situation like this, as a military leader, as a president, whatever, you have an idea of what your off ramps are. You have an idea of, if X doesn't work out, then we will do Y. Or we will find a way to, Israel's very good at that, by the way, because Israel has chosen very aggressive, very shocking, but fundamentally limited objectives as that it seeks to accomplish as part of its whole strategic vision. But they find ways out when things start to not, when the people start coming home in body bags, which is really the only metabolic thing that keeps Israel from getting deeper involved. But to me, this is where it's this is evidence of Trump had no plan to get out. And because there's no plan, he's in this really it's a political trap. It's entirely a political trap. Because as you say, there's no reason he can't just, make the call and say we're done. It's that he has to come up with a basis for political legitimacy to do that. And he's done so many different things, plus not having had the forethought. He doesn't have any way of accomplishing that. There is no political victory, even partial, that he can claim at this moment that we can yet see. And we're now entering week 3 or whatever the fuck of him trying to find simply that. I thought it was goofy. Can Iran give Trump a world peace award to end the war? I actually think that kind of logic is where we are headed, because we're not going to see actual things on the ground, or a major treaty. I know that we are in week 4. I think that they had a week where they thought they could really win this thing, and we've been 3 weeks of oh fuck, of where do I go?
The reason why I brought this is a theory that is maybe a little lib-brained of me, but I truly think Donald Trump doesn't believe in the competence of his own intelligence community and his own generals. And time again, he is listened to Vladimir Putin or even Benjamin Netanyahu in this instance. He will just be his own generals will come up to him and be like, dude, we're going to run out of fucking batteries. We're going to run out of defense systems. We don't have the procurement strategy to develop in a rush, just in time manufacturing system that we have, develop in a rush, all the fucking missiles that are necessary for keeping up this defense. And if you do this, it's going to be devastating. Dan Cain literally came out and leaked it to the press ahead of time. It's one of the biggest blows of the confidence of the American military is when your top general literally is this fucking idiot's not listening to me. I have to go and tell every outlet I possibly can that this is going to be a spectacular failure, with the hopes that there will be some pressure from reasonable minds.
There is one stratum of this, or one area of this that we haven't brought up, which is part of how this thing works and gets sustained. And that's I would say it's a combination of the Israel lobby and their fellow travelers. So I'm thinking of FDD, and I'm thinking of AIPAC, and I'm thinking of all these other organizations.
They talked about their objectives. It's literally copy paste from the FDD.
Yep.
FDD is a cutout for the Israeli government, by the way. For those of you who don't know, Foundation for Defense of Democracy. What's the Hebrew name of it initially? I think it's
I know they had to change the name because originally it was a Hebrew word, but they
I think it was a Hebrew word for truth.
Emet?
Yes, it was Emet. So FDD in 2001, when it was first launched, was called Emet. Okay, the Hebrew word for truth, and they had to like restructure it and make it more American because it was like too Israeli coded. But it's never actually changed its design. Its purpose is literally to serve as Benjamin Netanyahu's own personal think tank in America, and yeah, it's unbelievable that the American government's official communique shows a direct copy paste from the Israeli. Like the Israeli fucking mouthpiece in Washington D.C. Like, look,
I would also add
this level of infiltration is insane, dude.
I mean, and it's like infiltration is to me an accurate description from even if this was like some 24-year-old who's working for the Trump administration was told like, oh, we need to have this page up and running, like go get the fact sheet out, like, and this is their choice was to just copy and paste this. That tells you something. I think the other thing somebody else has been sharing this, about how Trump believes Israeli intelligence. Like one of the not so open or one of the not so like tight secrets of American foreign policy is that Israeli intelligence is garbage. Lawrence Wilkerson, the ex-Powell advisor, is like a very he's spoken very explicitly about this.
It didn't used to be.
Well, it's because it became, particularly since the Netanyahu era, like what it is it's intelligence at its worst for political purposes, meaning that it's intelligence that is made to support specific political objectives of the government.
Yes.
It's not like unvarnished political reporting. It's not sourcing. It's stuff that it's Iraq war stuff all over again.
Because the goal is not like in their minds like survival in the same way that like the American defense industry no longer operates for a specific military purpose or a specific military objective. There's so much defense bloat because it's a capitalist invention. So they don't give a fuck about like making the cheapest and the most resilient pieces of military equipment. The sophistication of it and the cost of it is no longer a consideration at all because it's just an unlimited slush fund, right? For all of the fucking shareholders that constantly draw further and further profits. And that's why you see the F-35, which is supposed to be this like this beacon of American military superiority, get fucking taken out by a K truck with a fucking built air defense system on top of it in the mountains of Iran. And it's a massive blow to American air superiority for
by the way,
anyone that can see it.
We're taking L's that we don't even know about yet. Like the fucking there's that ship that got hit that they're saying there was like a laundry fire, I think, the Gerald Ford. And then, there's never been all of a sudden, I don't know if you guys have known about this, but there's a lot of the F-15, which has had one of the most immaculate combat records in like 40, 50 fucking years of service. And then all of a sudden, we've been losing F-15s. Oh, yeah. And then there was that F-35 that went down. Yeah. A plane that, by the way, is going to cost billions to replace.
$2 trillion in R&D that is supposed to be the peak of American ingenuity, right? Is now being combat tested in real time and in a record pace has lost its air superiority against defenses. And people are coping so fucking hard that they're like, oh, this doesn't actually put a real dent in like American superiority.
By the way, what Maz Hussein is pointing out right now, by the way, here is really important because there was one opinion column in Al Jazeera a few days ago, last week, that was just getting passed around over and over. Like Ben Smith from Semaphore, a lot of people with, frankly, like a lot more sympathy than they should have for the Gulf countries or Gulf governments.
Well, they do
were
conferences
sharing it.
out
Yeah,
there.
exactly. But they were like, oh, this is really interesting. And
I went to the Pearl of the Gulf. Okay? I feel bad for Qatar. Maybe Iran should stop. That's what I think. That's right.
Yeah, that easy.
Yeah, it was that easy for me.
So like there was this article in Al Jazeera and it was all about how like it was the bear case for Iran essentially. It was saying that like, look, Iran is actually in a weak position. All of these launchers have been destroyed. How do we know they're destroyed? Because they're not launching missiles. And that was like the most salient factual claim in that piece. And it was like a very like now we're seeing no, Iran's capacity hasn't been diminished at all.
Yeah. It's like this is the thing
that I want. Not at all, but you know what I mean.
This is the thing that I want. Yeah, it's not been treated in the way that it's presented, right?
Exactly. That's my point.
And that's the thing that I want to ask people that like are constantly like reading the recycled Cope machine from people who are like, American military superiority is awesome. We're fucking, our dicks are so hard. Like how do you cope with that reality that like a fucking 34-year-old dickhead that has no like insider information has been openly fucking saying that this is a spectacular boondoggle from day one? I have literally been able to pinpoint and call out, alongside many people in the OSINT side of things that aren't so hoorah about American military superiority. How do you make sense of that reality where people from the outside can have more sober assessment about America's capabilities and, more importantly, its limitations than these people that are on the inside that have been basically fucking telling themselves and anyone who will listen lies over and over and over again? There have been people, there were people initially that would come into my chat and be like, you're just coping. You're just fucking sad that your best friend, the Ayatollah, got fucking murked and you can't get that sweet IRGC money any longer. And I was like, dude, I'm just telling you what's going to happen tomorrow. And when it happens tomorrow, you're going to come up with a fucking new cope. And they've been doing that now for fucking 23 days. When will it end?
That's pretty good. DUI hires.
Yeah, DUI hires. Exactly.
I haven't heard that one before.
Like 23 fucking days, man. It's crazy. At some point, you got to wake up to the reality that like the Iranian missile barrages are not stopping. And unironically, the Israeli defenses are actually diminished in the process. And they can't fucking defend the country anymore. Okay.
I mean, this is to me like what this really reminds me of is the like what's happening now reminds me of like what a lot of people when Reagan got elected, what they thought he was going to get into, and then they were kind of pleasantly surprised that he just decided to do proxy wars. There's
by the way, yeah. Oh, sorry to stop you, but hype train incoming. Piker Broadcasting Service. Please subscribe for tomorrow's news today. Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by you, the people, for you, the people. Piker Broadcasting Services sponsored by you, the people, for you, the people. Your subscriptions allow me to maintain my editorial independence. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. They wanted like Reagan to be the one who would like, you know, like, or they didn't want it. They thought Reagan would be the one to do all this or whatever. And it ended up being like a 40-year head start, but the 40-year, you know, like lag, I guess. But to me, the thing that like is a part of what jumps out is that like all of this reminds me of like it's the same language, the same rhetoric, the same patterns of thought as all the people who after America got washed in Vietnam were like, let's fucking get out there, let's do it again. You know, let's you know, saddle the fuck back up. Because I just don't know how you look at something like this and be like, you know what, we'll fix this if we just throw a bunch of ground troops into the equation.
Yeah, U.S. Navy nuclear aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford might be out of action for 14 months.
Bro, Jason Tatum wasn't even out that long.
It's fucked up.
Jason Tatum, like you see NBA players like every night like lose like tendons and they're back on the fucking court quicker than this.
Well, he's this $13 billion piece of expensive machinery is constantly in a. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Like, there's two working theories here, right? Obviously, one is that Iran was like peppering it somehow, and then the other one is like mutiny. Yeah, I think it could be mutiny.
So mutiny is in our Blowback season 5. Yeah, 5. Yeah, the one about Cambodia and Vietnam. I have a good interview with people who are part of like essentially like a race riot on a ship, the Kitty Hawk, and that was one of a number of incidents. And we mentioned this briefly in that season, but like. One of the reasons why there's a really great book by the author David Courtwright that also talks about this. Like essentially in 1972, during the period of time when Nixon finally is like really forced to like end the war, essentially, part of what's going on is all of these mutinies and riots on Navy ships, on aircraft carriers, the USS Constellation, the Kitty Hawk. And they're, these were very scandalous big events at the time that have been kind of, memory hold a bit. But part of what was so astonishing was that like troop readiness and morale was was one of the biggest reasons why the, military ended up, or the U.S. was forced to exit the Vietnam War. So the idea that
buddy fucking was like a commonplace practice.
I mean, you would read stories about like troops, who were in Cambodia who would frag their officers. Who were sending them to do pointless or stupid missions that they didn't agree with. I mean, granted, there was a draft, and a draft existing like that's why we had an anti-war movement. We had an anti-war movement because we had a draft.
Like that's the funniest thing when people are like, "Well, we should bring back the
draft."
draft."
I'm sorry. Why aren't people doing anti-war politics so good? What we did in Vietnam.
The people that are in defense of this administration's actions, claiming that we should do a draft, are the funniest people to me because you don't understand what you are fucking suggesting. The only way that the American war machine continues is when it constantly feeds self-selecting individuals who are volunteering, not knowing what they're going to get into in real, if we're being honest, they just don't fully comprehend. They just think like, oh, I'll just be on a ship for a little bit and then, I'll get a comms degree and hopefully I can get a fucking job and have my college paid for. But like, that is the system that has forced Americans or caused Americans to decouple entirely from foreign policy. If there was a draft initiated tomorrow, all of a sudden, it would become a very different reality. Every single 18 to 25-year-old would be losing their fucking minds. You would see a real anti-war movement.
Mild counterpoint.
Okay.
Gen Z, soon Gen Alpha, like generations of people whom we think of as like indoor kids.
Yeah.
They're on the computer a lot. I think a lot of them want to see the world. And we know that they're not going to be able to get good jobs that would allow them to travel. So I actually think, kind of almost like dialectically, they are the generation that if there is going to be a generation drafted to fight some psycho war, it would be like the iPad babies.
I think it's going to be
very hard. The first
hard.
iPad babies.
I disagree. I think it's going to be very hard to sell them on the idea that
they don't have to be sold. They don't have to consent. My point.
No, I know, but like I'm saying that they're not gonna fucking go and die for Israel. I don't think. But
no, I think that they're gonna. No, obviously, I think what's end up gonna happen. If there will never be a draft, it's not a viable option. It's political suicide in this country. But like the idea of committing ground troops in this moment, I think would have a very comparable effect. I think that if they were actually sending and preparing for like a meaningful ground presence with American troops that is, beyond being stationed at any of our bases or patrolling the seas or whatever in this moment, then like you would quickly start to see some 1970s style shit, even though we don't have a draft, because that's how unpopular this bullshit is.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if they would frag their officers, but I think you'll see, minor sabotage in the way that you're seeing currently. Like all of a sudden the toilets don't flush. And then they find out that there's like just t-shirts being dumped into the bathrooms. Who the fuck puts a t-shirt in the toilet? I mean, I know some of these guys are fucking stupid, but that made me think like this got to be deliberate.
Well, there's now, I think one of the things that we're starting to see, because there really are not many press institutions that have like ties with like the military. Meaning that like there aren't a ton of reporters who write for huge general audiences and who are also like, really plugged into what the most, creative minds and free thinking individuals, let's say, with those people in either the officer corps or among the general infantry. And that's not because like reporters today like love war that much more. It's just because of like the military's gotten that much better at keeping its personnel away from the press, and the press has been conditioned to not actually ask these kinds of questions. So I think that like the extent to which like we are seeing this sort of dissension among the troops, it's just not communicated publicly, and they can hide a lot of it. They're hiding a lot of it really successfully, I have to imagine.
Yeah. If you buy what CENTCOM is selling, this is the most accident-prone the U.S. military has been in its entire history. The F-15 entered service 60 years ago and has never been down during a war. Now 5 of them have been down by malfunction and friendly fire in 2 weeks. On March 5th, the IDF claimed to have destroyed 300 Iranian missile launchers. So over the next 2+ weeks of fighting, they only destroyed or disabled 30 launchers. None of it makes sense, especially because they were leaning too hard into either plugging some holes, which they probably successfully did, right? Like the entry points into where these these tunnel systems are, and that caused a momentary pause in the volleys that were being launched, or Iran was actually, moving in a different direction and trying to make sure that this was a war of attrition and they could continue doing this for as long as possible. And that's why they were taking pot shots with the cluster munitions that they keep opening up on top of the Israeli airspace, because you only, as I kept repeatedly explaining, you only do that when your goal is to just like frustrate Israeli society. You're not doing that for any sort of like specific military purpose beyond, pissing off Israeli society, crippling the Israeli economy, forcing them into bomb shelters, because those are not interceptable missiles.
This goes to an argument also that Dylan Saba has put forward. He wrote for Jewish Currents in 2023 that I think is still one of the most powerful interventions I've ever read on anything related to these issues, which was about how Iron Dome is an offensive weapon. And the idea is that Israel's defensive capabilities have been so aggressively beefed up so as to inoculate Israelis from what in any other context would be viewed as like the reasonable costs incurred for fighting a regional war.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
There is now, and I think in this situation, Iran has finally figured out that we have taken, their leaders have arrived at the decision, forced really, that there's no more respecting that. You have to flood the zone and test the limits of this system. And they've tested it, and they found that actually, Israeli leaders are now having to prepare their. A family of mine has heard this as well. Israeli leaders are trying to prime the population for the idea that they may not have to, because all of the Israelis running to the shelter and stuff before, when Hezbollah would send a rocket, or when Islamic Jihad or Hamas would send a rocket from Gaza and it would land in a field in Beersheba. You were talking about almost what was for Israeli leaders, as they saw it, the perfect level of suffering that they could experience, because it reminded the population of the danger, but it was not enough to actually destroy and disrupt their quality of life over the course of year, 2 years, whatever. And having lived in Beersheba, having lived in the south in the Israeli South myself, and at a time when that was the case, it was very obvious that was the function.
Yeah, that's why when you interview regular folks, ordinary Israeli society, they just have a totally insane attitude about waging war with Iran, because from their perspective, there's no cost. There's some costs, there's minor nuisances, and I suspect that might change eventually, but I don't know, because part of me also thinks that just as we saw with October 7th, they're fucking insane.
They're insane, but they have there's a limit, not a limit to how crazy they are, but insanity can be checked by reality and certain, how crazy are you willing to be when your bank account is zero, that kind of, or when it goes to zero and you can't feed yourself. There's a certain kind of degree there's a certain element of this to me where part of what we still have not seen yet is the real stress test applied, not just to Israelis, everyday Israelis and their everyday happiness and their joy, with bombs and missiles falling on them. It's instead about the question of can the Israeli society, can the Israeli polity survive intact in any recognizable form were this war to continue and their economy were to become devastated? Because Israel is not Iran. Israel is a tiny country, and it has a lot of
tiny country
and
size of New Jersey.
Meaning, though, what happens when a lot of those people who have dual citizenship in other countries and have been for the past number of years, even before October, this is a story I've told many times. A very, very influential and well-known Israeli journalist reached out to me. This is well before October 7th, because I had said, on Twitter, I said something I had informally heard that there were many people who had been, who were leaving Israel because prior to October 7th, the radical government was making a bunch of Israeli libs start to feel, nervous and sketchy. And so if you had a German passport, an American passport, people were starting to move assets. And I'd said, I threw some cold water on that. I was I haven't seen the numbers. I haven't seen the statistics. And then this guy out of nowhere, somebody who I don't have a connection to, saw my comment and was just I just want to let you know, I think you're wrong. And that was prior to October 7th. I would be fascinated if, you know, I would be so curious how, if the conditions in Israel were actually made that much more damaging, if they were that much more destructive to the average Israeli life, what, again, you know, what might happen for all of the people who are in Israel who don't necessarily want to stay there. And I think that that's where, again, like we've really not seen, and what I'm describing may be a situation that just like is not really plausible, because Israel would move so aggressively to prevent any circumstance like that from happening in real time. But I think that like what I'm really trying to point out is that we've not even seen Israel get tested to that point, and what Iran has been doing in terms of how it is stretching the limits of Israeli defenses is suggesting that, well, maybe we are going to see if that can happen. Maybe we're going to see if that possibility can be breached.
Yeah. Now let's look at another exit ramp for the world's least loyal man, who has always thrown everybody else under the bus. Perhaps this could be a first inclination of who might be in the crosshairs. Let's take a look.
I called Pete, I called General Kane, I called a lot of our great people. We have great people, and I said, let's talk. We got a problem in the Middle East. We have a country known as Iran that for 47 years has been just a purveyor of terror, and they're very close to having a nuclear weapon. We can keep going and get that 50,000 up to 55 and 60 is no end. Or we can take a stop and make a little journey into the Middle East and eliminate a big problem. And Pete, I think you were the first one to speak up. And you said, let's do it, because you can't let them have a nuclear weapon. So we are now having really good discussions. They started last...
I don't know if he'll throw Pete under the bus here. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, that sounds like he's giving Pete a pat on the head, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and I'm sure, you know, like Pete has got a nice heart on having gotten that pat on the head.
Yeah. Iran's main demand is communicated to the mediators. If Trump fires Hexit, all bets are off. Moin Rabbani is joking there.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah. Breaking. The Speaker of Iran's parliament, who some claim has been negotiated with the U.S., says no negotiations have taken place, and the President Trump is claiming otherwise to manipulate the markets. It is crazy that, like, because it's no longer a non-state actor in the same way that, like we very quickly did away with the Iraqi government, right? In the immediate invasion, and we were fighting against like a not like a fully fleshed out state in the Taliban and Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, but Iran is a state actor. It's a sovereign state, so you can't, especially with like social media, you can't really undermine their position as much as you could, like dominate the airwaves when you're talking about Israel versus Hamas. Talking about Israel versus Hezbollah. Like, you have dudes with like 8 PhDs on fucking, the interpretation of Quran from a Western capitalist framework, who are just coming out and posting on social media and also doing interviews in English with American news outlets. All of a sudden, I think that plays a major role in, it delivers a major blow to whatever the American goals of propaganda are, right? Is then mainstream media will cover the Iran.
There's another thing though,
posts.
which is that it's not just about that Iran's a state and that, Hamas is like a political organization with like limited autonomy, whatever. It's that Iran also has like the world economy by the nuts. Yeah. Like that they can do things that force people to take them seriously. Yeah. And it's just literally not been until this wave of this conflict that all of a sudden the West realized it. Because Iran had chosen not to go this far. They made the Iranian government, for whatever reason, much to the criticism of people much to the criticism of Western leftists, for example, they chose not to take it to this level until this most. It was recent.
Undeniable that it was
until Trump said we're coming to kill all of you.
Like I think this was Yahya Sinwar's calculation. It's just that both Hassan Nasrallah and Khamenei were far more restrained than he thought they would be. That's what I think.
Meaning, like in the prior conflicts, meaning that he
Yes.
thought it would come to this earlier.
I think that the purpose of the Al-Aqsa flood was to trigger was to trigger an Iranian retaliation of this sort.
I think it's plausible. I think one of the things though is that like it's there's always this kind of, and this is like also what Israel's deal was, is that they're always like testing the limits of what they think they can get away with. Because I also think in some sense what you're describing is that like yes, they wanted to provoke some kind of response, but now we're in a dog getting the car situation. And like I think that they actually knew all along that they didn't want that smoke. What they wanted is what they said that they wanted, which is that they wanted the Iranian people to rise up. Like I also do believe that on some level, like these guys have been believing their own bullshit about the closeness of, put it this way, you were just in Cuba. You saw what life was like in Cuba. For 60 years, every American president, save for Obama, has been told by their advisors, we're this close. You're going to be the president who's going to get to see the Castro regime fall. You know, it's the same thing with Iran. And I think that they ultimately believed their bullshit too much, even if they weren't believing it coming out of the Pahlavi's mouth. Like they believed it on this, like deeper level because they literally hadn't been presented with like a counter fact at any point, and until now.
Yeah, I mean Trump. I think other presidents have. Not saying much, but even including Biden, like have at least like demonstrated some level of restraint. Because I believe that Israel behind closed doors was always telling them the same fucking lie. But at least they were like competent enough to listen to their generals and their analysts and their own intelligence assessment to be like, no, we're not fucking doing that. You're out of your goddamn mind. It's too much of a risk, right? Until Trump. I think Trump demonstrated in Trump 1 and also in Trump 2, as we're seeing now, that he was the guy who was going to be like, yeah, no, you guys, your intelligence is great. I love what you did with the beepers, that type of shit.
Yeah.
Running off of like the highs that he got from the Venezuela operation, which was remarkably competent in comparison to what we're seeing in Iran right now, right? He thought this would be swift. I think he believed
the Maduro thing really got to his head.
Yeah, no, I think he genuinely thought, oh, decapitation, boom, 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 because I know he does not want to put boots on the ground.
No,
he has never, like, he might inevitably lean in that direction because he's like he's not going to back away, right?
This one I don't know about, because I also don't think that like you leak that you're considering troops, or you don't allow it to get out that you're considering ground troops, because it's in this current moment. The Iranians will read that as a sign of weakness because they're like, bring that on. If that's the level you're going to, bring it on. And politically, domestically, it's insanely unpopular. So if it doesn't present to Iran as or the world as a show of strength, and it drives the American public crazy, then why are you doing it? And that's where I think that like I do hold some measure of judgment on whether or not Trump is actually like opposed to ground troops. We know that he said at different points like Iraq, it was a mistake. I'm never gonna no new wars. But like
he's
a master liar.
Yeah, but think about it. Like he didn't do that in Venezuela. He amassed a big enough force to potentially draw Venezuela or go into a much larger conflict in Venezuela. Like you don't amass that level of naval forces if your goal is not to like eventually take it. I mean, if you're not willing to present that as a threat, while simultaneously he has always done crazy shit, but he has also backed away at times.
I don't disagree, but Venezuela Venezuela worked also though, because like you saw the Wall Street Journal article about the CIA guy.
Oh yeah, the
who worked for Chevron.
Yeah.
Like Venezuela is different from every other country that we've talked to, because American corporation multinationals have had a major like presence in Venezuela for like within the last 20 years. I mean, there are people who are CIA affiliated who worked with Chavez to get oil out of Venezuela into the world market. It's not like meaning that there were connections. There were, they had, I think they had a more realistic portrait of what the situation was in Venezuela and how they could exploit it. It doesn't seem, to me, it just seems like they had the one radical plan that actually had a chance of working because of, the way they did it out and the legwork they did. And Trump's lesson from that was oh, well, I could just do whatever I want now because we did whatever I wanted here, even though that wasn't what they did. They did a pretty specific thing with some limits, and that's not this.
Yeah. All right, let's hear what Scale's new reporting looks like. Senior Iranian official tells Drop Site News, Jeremy Scale and Mortaza Hussein, there aren't any negotiations taking place. The Iranian side has simply communicated its conditions to the U.S. And even that has been done indirectly, adding that the U.S. messages have also only been passed through intermediary countries.
Debated how to even deal with this, and they literally ghosted Steve Witkoff. They did not respond to him. When we reported that last week, the White House went nuts. They denounced Drop Site News, accusing us of engaging.
Yeah, they said Drop Site News is a terrorist outlet.
In America Last behavior, said we were abhorrent, and then they went and they spun a story to Axios saying that it was actually the Iranians that had been begging President Trump to speak. And so, this kind of played out over the past few days. And what Iranian sources were telling me, Daniel, is that through a series of intermediary countries, including Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt, and also some Gulf countries, there have been a series of messages passed on to the Iranians by the United States where, according to Iranian officials, these third-party intermediaries have said that the U.S. wants to wrap up this war. And that happens while publicly Trump is saying, we're going to bomb Iran's electrical and power infrastructure, which, by the way, would be a war crime if they did that in a sweeping manner. Iran then said, hey, let us tell you what we can do. We can hit not only in Israel, but we can hit in all throughout the Gulf. And this would cause just like catastrophic shock to the global economy, which we can talk about later. But the most breaking stuff I have for you is that Trump today posts on Truth Social that there's been this breakthrough, that he's pausing his threat to bomb the Iranian electrical grid and other energy infrastructure because there have been these talks going on between the United States and Iran. And Trump implies that he has some secret squirrel that he's talking to in Iran, and he doesn't want to name who it is because he doesn't want that person to be killed. It's unclear, does he mean by Israel or by the Iranians? But what I'm told is that there have been no negotiations, direct negotiations with the United States, and that what the Iranian officials are telling me is that every time a third country comes to Iran and they say the United States wants to talk, Iran says, let us explain to you our conditions. And in short, what the Iranians are saying is that they will not agree to the kind of ceasefire that took place last June after the so-called 12-day war, because the Iranians view that as having been a gimmick to buy the United States and Israel time to rearm, to reposition, and then come back in with this full-blown war that they launched on February 28th. So they're saying they won't go for just a ceasefire that doesn't have conditions attached to it. They also want any cessation of the war not only to apply to Iran, but to apply to two other fronts of battle, as the Iranians see it, Iraq as well as Lebanon, where the Israelis are increasingly engaged in ground operations.
Iraq has also been a spectacular failure that's like not getting a lot of attention in this media cycle because there's so much devastation taking place everywhere. But they had to literally do a tactical retreat, a ceasefire with the Iraqi ground forces, the Shia forces in Iraq, to literally withdraw their troops. Did you see that part?
Yep. And well, it's, I mean, part of what's
Iraq has been trying to democratically force the American troops to leave for years now.
And Iraq has like been this, it's like for essentially since the end of the Iraq War, because Iraq is this kind of like desiccated country, it's been a place where a lot of different militia groups and a lot of other like non-state political and military forces, drive events on the ground. And the U.S. viewed it as essentially like it went from being its own place and its own war to then becoming like a kind of like soft proxy battleground against Iran. And now, I mean, we'll see. I haven't read anything in depth about like the total, how Washington takes the total situation.
U.S. forces are now limited to the Kurdistan region, according to the Iraqi resistance, and they moved many of their troops into Jordan, I think. So it's I mean, this is devastating for again American military superiority, American might, American force projection capabilities. Like it's unbelievable. Things are stable now that the Americans left. We only had like 3 hours per day. American and NATO forces asked the Iraqi government for a temporary 24-hour ceasefire with the Iraqi resistance factions to facilitate their withdrawal from Victory Base in Baghdad, according to spokesperson for Saraya Avliya Al-Dam Abu Mahdi Al-Jafari. Al-Jafari said that most resistance factions that received the Iraqi government's request agreed to the truce on the condition that popular mobilization sites from the holy city of Samarra to Karbala would not be targeted. But if you return to sin, we will return to punishment. Beast mode.
That is pretty hard.
Beast mode. By the way, this has reverberations across the entire world. The reason why I say this is because the American military presence as a force projection capability is everywhere all at once, right? All of a sudden, this changes the calculation. All of a sudden, this changes the calculation in the Philippines, for example. This changes the calculation of like how well America could safeguard the bulwark against communism in South Korea, right? This changes the domestic considerations in South Korea for the South Korean government. All of a sudden, they're more willing to bargain as equal partners with the DPRK. If the Filipino government is also smart enough to recognize that reality, they have a very different opinion about getting into a bilateral security commitment with China in the South China Sea. They're the only country there's a holdout in the Asian cooperative structure that has refused to leftist cope Lamau. Oh my God. American troops are shitting in their fucking diapers. NATO also evacuated. Wait, what? Leftist cope Lamau? It's weird that I can't tell if you're like making a joke or if you're being serious. But like, as I was saying, the Philippines are the only country in the Asian system that has not engaged with China. Okay, they're the only country in that system that is a holdout. Right? What do? What do they continue? Do they have a real belief that America will defend them if it's no longer Iran, but now we're talking about China? It's just not going to work.
Very heavy bombing. Hezbollah, which Israel had said was wiped out, has been launching dozens upon dozens of rockets every single day into Israel. So they want those two countries also to be party to this ceasefire deal. They're also saying that they want reparations paid by the United States, and they want Israel to pay, but they don't want Israel to pay directly. They want that to happen through the United States because they don't want to take anything directly from Israel. But the other thing, and this is, I think very relevant, and many people, I know you've made this point before, and I've heard other smart analysts make it, that because of the way the United States and Israel have lied about the negotiations, have used it as a veneer or a cover to then wage these wars, the Iranian position has hardened. And what Iran is saying now is that there will be no discussion on its ballistic missile program, that if there is a ceasefire, Iran is going to move rapidly to continue its ballistic missile program, recognizing that it's its only deterrent against the United States and against Israel. They're also saying, and they wouldn't go into more detail on this, that they're in the process of developing a new doctrine on the nuclear question. They didn't say, oh, we're going to go and we want to enrich uranium to make nuclear weapons. But what they're saying to me is that that because of the U.S. and Israel targeting their nuclear infrastructure, because they blew up the negotiations where the Iranians had put terms on the table that went beyond the Obama-era deal, they're saying now that they're having discussions about developing a new nuclear doctrine, potentially in partnership with Russia and China.
Well,
more concrete decolonization accomplished by Iran and its allies in 3 weeks than most post-colonial studies academics have managed.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that UC Santa Cruz professors don't carry guns, but
that's a ridiculous comparison.
But but it is like fair to say that Iran is, and not just there, Iran is doing something like that.
Yeah, it's not just there; it's Sudan as well. Like The disruption.
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
The disruption of the United Arab Emirates has delivered a devastating blow to the rapid support forces and their activities in Sudan, where the Sudanese population have been able to successfully rise up and actually push out the RSF from all of these towns that they fucking genocided and took over. It's crazy.